Trump. What do you want to say first, Judge? But do you just want to get into Donald Trump?
Well, let me say this about Donald Trump. Like him or not, you have to understand that it's not just Donald Trump. It's our rights as citizens of the United States of America. And some of our most profound rights have been articulated in the names of some very unsavory, bad people. I'll give you a classic example. Your Miranda rights, the right to remain silent. Miranda was not a good person, but we all cherish those rights, and they're very valuable in terms of preventing oppression or wrong when it comes to justice and right doing with our system. In that sense, what we have with Donald Trump is an example of a trend in federal law that allows the use of the criminal laws of the country for purposes of persecution. And there has never been anything quite like this in the history of the country. So we're going to have to do something about that. We have to stop this because, as an adjunct professor told me, not an adjunct professor, a professor emeritus who was visiting UCLA, and I was her teaching assistant 50 some years ago. She said America is in grave danger of becoming fascist, not from some jackboot wearing, goose stepping communists, not communists, but fascist thugs wearing uniforms, but from some hippies who would gladly impose the worst methodology of fascism in the name of doing something for you. So we have to be very careful of that. Now, I'll pass the mic.
Right. So, thanks for that, just setting the stage up, because what is he indicted on again? Like they're trying to throw all these damn indictments at this man. You got something going on in New York. Now this in Florida. I guess this is for the confidential documents that they're saying he shouldn't have had. And he had it in his home. So they brought him up on federal charges for that. What is this with the federal documents? And if he's going to be indicted, where's the indictment for Joe Biden? Is this a setup to impeach Joe Biden so Kamala Harris could be president? But why? What is going on with the federal indictments? And what is going on today when he appears in court? Like, how is this going to play out? You're muted, Judge. You have to unmute. You muted yourself. You're still muted. Judge, you're still muted. You have to unmute. I can't unmute you. We can't hear you because you're muted. Press the mute button. I don't have time for Twitter universe to be playing today.
Excuse me. I had to mute. Somebody was at the front door.
Oh, okay. I was making sure nobody was trying to mess with your connection.
No, anyway. Yeah, the thing with Trump, and we're talking about Bragg in New York. That might be an explanation or an example of what's going on that speaks for itself. Bragg indicted Trump and his corporation and some other individuals for activity that was actually legal. He supposedly essentially got into this to go after Trump for attempting to bribe Stormy Daniels to not embarrass him. Now, taking that allegation, let's flip it like a good lawyer's supposed to, and I don't think Bragg is one. If you have to pay somebody off to keep them from embarrassing you, you got what? What do they call it? The initials are BM. It's called blackmail. You got blackmailed. So Bragg indicted the victim of a blackmail attempt, a successful one. Now, additionally, American law encourages settlement rather than litigation, assuming there was something to it. So the corporate entity, because it was deemed in their best interest, decides to settle it. Now, Bragg wants to indict the corporation as an apparatus and also Trump for being affiliated with them because the corporation didn't fully disclose a generic expense to Stormy Daniels under the so-called corporate reporting laws. Well, if they had done that, that would have been public record as to what the conditions of the settlement with Stormy Daniels were about. And also, it would have violated the gag provision of the settlement, which says the parties are not supposed to talk about it. So, again, Bragg returns an indictment against an entity for following the law. And it goes on in that light. This is nothing but persecution to remove the ability of the American public to participate in the selection of the next president by determining which set of electors they're going to vote for. Now, that is just impermissible. Now, what is supposedly going on down in Florida is a contention that it's not that he removed the documents, because there is unchallenged authority for the president of the United States to do that. One, the documents were prepared for his use. Now, Bill Clinton was interesting in that he has an eidetic memory, and he memorized damn near everything that he read. I can do that to an extent myself. So the CIA's mandate was to provide documentation, it was to provide digested intelligence so that the president of the United States could stay abreast of important developments around the world. The documents were prepared exclusively for Trump's usage. The rights and authority that he had are set forth in a case known as U.S. Department of the Navy versus Egan, EGAN, 1988, heard before the U.S. Supreme Court. There are some concurring opinions, and when you read them, it is clear that the President of the United States has absolute authority to do two things. Three things, actually. One, to pardon and commute. Two, to classify. And three, to declassify documents. He gets the latter two, dealing with classification status of documents, through his authority as one, commander-in-chief of the military, and two, as chief diplomat. As commander-in-chief of the military, he has absolute authority to override any of the command authority in the Department of Defense. In other words, if a general, the board, chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff says it should be classified, the president has the authority to overrule him. If somebody says it should be declassified, the president has the authority to countermand that and says it is to be classified. As chief executive of state, he has the authority to do the same thing. Why? Because as chief diplomat of the United States, it may be deemed in the best interest as he sees it to say reveal something that is otherwise strictly classified to the French ambassador, the English ambassador, the prime minister, or whatever may be his choice when it comes to diplomacy. He can partially declassify, he can declassify or change classification status relative to who can hear it or not. And a great deal of what's going on when it comes to misstatements to, let's say, the archivist and some others, it may simply be a reflection of his unquestionable authority to make a determination that they don't have an adequate security clearance to look at what is in my home, Malargo. And then the other thing is, too, these documents might not be as secure in the National Archives as they were or would be in Malargo. Why? Because the same apparatus that secures the White House where they were stored is the exact same apparatus that guards Malargo. That's called the Secret Service. There is no such entity guarding the National Archives, because anything and everything contained in there is open to the public. You might have to go through more hoops for certain things and jump through them for certain things and others, but it's still declassified. Now, that is the case, again, of if you look at it, back off and deal with the law that has been long established in the country. This is an exercise of prosecutorial discretion that is uncalled for. It's unprecedented, and it sets a very bad precedent for the powers that reside in the Justice Department to be used for political oppression. Now, this is letting a bureaucracy get it completely out of control, and it also does this. The U.S. attorneys for a given district, in this case, one down in Florida, are appointed by the president, approved by the Senate. So you have an entity in place who is appointed by the current president, who has a vested interest in seeing that Mr. Trump does not run against him. And you've seen the performance of Mr. Biden, which is not good. And also, it's interesting that the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, has forbidden any debates leading up to the primary vote counts that will be held in the next few months. So we have something being crammed down our throats with no choice as to who the person's going to be. So it's interesting politics when you take this dodge to deprive the country of its opportunity to participate in the selection of the next president. That is something straight out of the National Socialist Workers' Party playbook. And for anyone who does not know what the National Socialist Workers' Party is, the acronym should be familiar. In German, the acronym is known as Nazi, Nazi. So let that be taken as a word up on what we need to be paying a lot of attention to. Now, I'll pass the mic with that.
Okay. So I did see Cheryl request to come up, and now I see Matthew. So Cheryl, if you want to request to come back up, do so. So because I'm opening up for people to request to come up and share their opinions, thoughts on Donald Trump indictment, which is a total of 37. He arrived at the courthouse, Deputy U.S. Marshals are expected to take Trump's fingerprints electronically, but are not expected to take a mugshot. Trump and his attorney will appear before the magistrate judge, Jonathan Goodman, for his arraignment and initial appearance. Trump's attorney will likely waive a formal reading of the indictment, and a formal president is expected to enter a plea of not guilty to all 37 charges. It's possible Trump won't be seen entering or leaving the courthouse because they have an underground garage. And Trump is set to return back to Bedminster, New Jersey, to his resort, where he will announce, where his campaign announced he will deliver an evening statement from his golf club there. So I kind of want to go into what's going to happen with his campaign. He's going to get way more support. Number one,
they're already ramping it up. I've got today, in the last 3 hours, 6 or 7 of these circulars that go around through text raising money, and they're expressing outrage. And when you visit the sites, they're already getting polls where the man's support is getting ramped up. See, politics is interesting, and it's a matter of be careful what you ask for. You might get it.
Right.
You might set a bad precedent, or you might turn someone into a martyr. In other words, when you martyr them, you generate far more support for them than they would have gotten otherwise. So, like my professor said, instead of jackboot wearing goose.
Oh, somebody must be calling him.
Instead of jackbooted, goose-stepping uniformed thugs who were the fascists, you get, she used to put them beatniks. We'd call them hippies. And then now we'd call them the far left.
Right. Because the Democrats, they probably don't care if he's a martyr, as long as they can get reelected or put a Democrat administration in there, or even DeSantis, because I think he's compromised. But I'm gonna go to Matthew.
Well, let me add one further thing before you go to Matthew. There's this. There is a principle in American law, particularly federal law, where it goes into disparate treatment. In other words, the whole thing subject to dismissal if you can show that other people similarly situated are not treated the same. And the classic example of that would rest upon the shoulders of the current president, Mr. Biden. Mr. Biden had several classified documents in his unauthorized possession. And unlike the president of the United States, the vice president has absolutely no constitutional authority to classify or declassify documents. He had them in a less than secure place. And if you take them into context with the laptops, the 3 laptops that Hunter Biden left to be repaired, the contents of which I have perused at some length when I was the judge on a moot court proceeding that Fox had at the beginning of the year, where we looked into it. There are constant referrals between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden relative to a certain individual being allowed to go by and inspect certain things that were at the family properties. The individual in question was indicted and convicted of espionage against the United States of America. So it's interesting that this person is being directed toward the Biden home, properties to inspect certain things. And these documents were there, and the Secret Service has declined to release a list of who visited. So they also have declined to release a list of what those documents were. Now, if you take them into context of the inferences from the laptops, they have a stronger case of wrongdoing, primary wrongdoing, if not actual treason against Biden than they do against Trump. So that's disparate treatment. It's hypocrisy. And it shows even more so that there is a high degree of danger inherent in the circumstances we are watching right now. Circumstances that have never occurred in the entirety of the 240-some year history of the United States of America. So let's keep that
All
in
right.
context. Now I pass the mic.
Matthew, and anybody else want to request to come up, please do so. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, how you guys doing? Thank you for letting me come up and speak. To add on to what you guys were saying, I really think this is a hell of a Hail Mary, um, what they're doing. But I also think that if there's nothing there, why would they want to give him all this free publicity, and rally all the people up to like get his side? I don't know. So just because I don't know all the facts, it looks like it looks like it's just a witch hunt, basically, like what he's been saying from the beginning. But we also don't know all the facts. However, I was raising my hand to ask Judge Joe Brown. I know you guys, when I first came in here, were talking about, pride and all that other stuff. And I was wondering, like, when you were in Hollywood, like, did you see any of that stuff? Like, did you, like, was it known to you back then or anything like that?
Yeah, at the time I was in Hollywood, LGBTQ bragged that 8 or 9 out of every 10 people you saw anywhere in Hollywood were in their thing. But then that wasn't actually true because a lot of gay folk despise and detest LGBTQ and think it's a cult. As they explained, you can be Islamic, but you don't necessarily support ISIS or Al Qaeda. You can be Christian, but you don't necessarily support the late Reverend Jim Jones and drinking Kool-Aid at outdoor church picnics in Guyana. So it's like all gays are not LGBTQ, and the association of LGBTQ with pedophilia and transvestitism is not pleasing to a lot of our gay citizens. Now, they have control of Hollywood and they implement a cult, but this is not unusual. And one thing that I have preached about is that be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. And when you get it, you don't like the consequences. And that's exactly what we are looking at right now.
I just want to throw this in there. U.S. Senator J.D. Vance said he is going to stall Justice Department nominees of President Biden. Justice Department nominees, he's going to stall it.
Good for him. That's
yeah.
politics, and that's allowed under the rules that attend to the operation of the United States Senate.
And I did read that I think McCollin, the one with the turkey neck, he's supposed to make an announcement. But I did read that the Republican Party is going to push for the people running for president on a Republican ticket to make sure to push for a pardon. And I think they're looking way ahead, right? So I do believe that the Republican Party is supporting Donald Trump, and they should. They definitely should, because it's not just about him. It's about all of, United States democracy in this country.
Let me say this. I don't want to interrupt you, but remember, we have appellate courts, and remember that the structure of the top appellate court, the United States Supreme Court, is not exactly structured to be friendly to this leftist move that we are observing. So if they apply something that is at this point, let's see, 35 years old, from 1988, what comes out of U.S. Department of Navy versus Egan, this case doesn't have a chance in hell of going anywhere. But back in the late 1970s, 1977 to be exact, and then 1981, Biden and Eastland and Stennis and Byrd pushed for some changes in federal procedure when it came to criminal law that allow a prosecutor to use the powers of the criminal law, the authority of the criminal law, to unjustly prosecute someone for the purpose of destroying that person's ability to be inconvenient, or if the person represents a political or social ideology that is not popular to the powers that be. So that's what you're seeing. Now, just because somebody charged the president with this or charged somebody else with something People say, well, why would they charge somebody with something they know they can't win? Well, I've been practicing law or being a judge for about a half century. And most of what I spent my time on was criminal law. I tried many federal cases representing defendants, and only one was found guilty, as she should have been. She was a big time drug dealer, guilty as sin, but they convicted her. But every other one, even though I might have had to try the case multiple times to get a complete slate of not guilty verdicts on all of the many counts, every single one of my clients was acquitted. So that meant, obviously, that the United States government, through its Department of Justice and the local U.S. attorney, made a mistake, or they had an inadequate case. And the fact of the matter is just a little more than 2% of all people in the penitentiary were found guilty by a jury, and 97+% pled guilty. So before we even get to the point of whether or not we need a pardon, there are going to be some motions, I'm sure, filed that will deal with motion to dismiss based on the fact that there is a disparate treatment in this situation because Biden has not been indicted on similar charges that have more substance to them. You have another situation, even if everything the government says, that's subject to a demurrer. And what that amounts to is, even if everything the U.S. government says is true, it's no crime committed, so it's dismissal. And also, as a matter of constitutionality, since Marbury versus Madison 220 some years ago, it has long been the law in the United States that courts can overrule any sort of action taken by a legislative body if that action is unconstitutional. So we set in motion a big picture situation here.
I appreciate you going in details because the majority, everyone across this nation and the world is just getting their information from the media, and that's nothing but sound bites. And it's very detailed, this situation. I want to go to Leon, and anybody else want to request to come up, please do so. Go ahead, Leon. Leon, you can unmute.
Yeah, but I was going to ask a question of the judge. I'm going to say I'll play devil's advocate. Let's say what the prosecutors and the Democrats are saying is correct, that he had all these documents. How is it possible? I mean, first of all, is there anybody who really thinks that Trump did put anybody in real danger? Did he lose any real their secrets? How is it possible that we have a law on the books, that somebody can be locked up to 400 years for taking a document after he was president of the United States? How is that even possible? How does that make sense?
Did you catch that, Judge? Because he's driving, so
I did. I got it. I can answer it. Well, Marbury versus Madison decided in the very first decade of the 19th century, 220 some years ago, says that the appellate courts, the courts of the United States, have authority to declare legislative actions unconstitutional. And that's what you have. The next thing is absolutely preposterous for this situation to develop as it is. It is unprecedented. And again, you have this situation where the documents were provided for the president. As far as it goes in terms of compromise of national security, the documents were under the same kind of protection and scrutiny, that is, protection of the Secret Service of the United States of America, as they were when they were in the White House, having been prepared for the president's briefings. So if they briefed him with it, they handed it to him, he was in charge of it. Remember, they were prepared on his order. If you are the chairman of a corporation and you order something prepared, and it is prepared on your order or by somebody you supervise or who works for you or is employed by you, then what is it when you start talking about you, the subordinate, don't like what your boss did with what you prepared for him? It's crazy. Absolutely insane. And everybody involved in this ought to be prosecuted themselves for abuse of process and acting under color of law for an inappropriate purpose.
I want to go to John, then Matthew, and then I'll swing back to Leon if he has another question. Go ahead, John.
To touch on what Judge just said, I was talking about this with a friend of mine earlier today, and we were talking about these secret grand juries. And there's been a United States Supreme Court justice who quoted from him. He said, basically, you can get a judge to get a secret grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. And I'll drop it there. Thank you.
You know what? I've done this for a half century. I've been a major trial judge for the state of Tennessee. I've tried 42 capital murder cases as a defense lawyer, a bunch more where they didn't ask for the death penalty. I've tried, in other words, I handled 1/10 of the cases in the 5th largest criminal jurisdiction in the United States of America. Yeah, that happens. Some of the people sitting on the bench would do better in a circus clown show, with due respect. There are judges, I know judges who literally got appointed to a judgeship within the week they got sworn into the bar, just after graduating from law school. And I know at least one federal judge now on an appellate level who got made a federal judge less than a year and a half out of law school and had never set foot in a courtroom until they got sworn in as the judge of that courtroom.
And also your favorite person who cannot define a woman.
Yeah, and that's just ridiculous. Her practice of the profession is scant. And that's one of the reasons that American law looks so crazy. See, in England, you have to go through the exact same process as a lawyer, as a doctor does to be a physician. You have to have an internship program that you go through, and then as a resident under strict supervision. In America today, there are too many lawyers, and they charge fees that are so high because they don't have the volume to keep their doors open, so they charge bigger fees. But you are typically getting a lawyer who has never gone through the apprentice part of becoming a lawyer. You have people who are charging big fees in major firms that they've set up, used advertising. They've been out of law school 10 years and tried one case. Or they have a national reputation for settling cases, but they've never been in front of a jury. So instead of getting this internship through typically public defender's office or the prosecutor's office, where you learn what the difference is between what you've been reading in a textbook and what 12 men and women say about it when they get it presented to them. You don't have that. So you have judges at the top, you have judges in the middle, judges at the bottom, and plenty of lawyers who have absolutely no experience in the practice of law. They've just been looking stuff up and filling out documents. And they do some of the most ignorant, stupid things you have ever seen. Like somebody on a bench, when you walk in and you're sworn in as a judge and you've never been in one of those courtrooms. You've never seated a jury. You don't know how many charges or challenges rather someone gets. It's absolutely ridiculous. We had a district attorney here the one next before last. I was on the bench. The person was 2 hours late being sworn in. You know why? He was the new district attorney and he never set foot in the criminal justice system before. He had to go park himself next to a phone booth, and they had to go get him because he didn't know where he was supposed to go. Or somebody I also know. I thought of another judge. Graduated from law school, took the bar, got sworn in, and 4 days later got made a judge over a circuit court with unlimited jurisdiction in Tennessee. Biggest amateur in the whole courtroom is the judge.
I want to go into the pride, but I'm going to go to Matthew, and then I want to go to the pride at the White House. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, so isn't one of the main reasons that they can exercise all that power is because of Article 1, Section 8, where it gave Congress the power basically to form an administrative branch. And so most courts underneath the Supreme Court or whatever you might say are working in an administration capacity.
Section 8 is sort of an umbrella provision in the Constitution. It ranges from everything from it shall be the duty and obligation of the naval forces of the United States to suppress and eliminate piracy wherever found in the world. It requires that all constitutional officers uphold the law of nations, etc. Article 6 requires that all judges, federal and state, follow such treaties as have been ratified by the Senate, which are interesting in the context we have. And it's not just Article 1, Section 8. You also have Article 2 and some other matters in there, Article 6. And the Constitution is supreme, and there was a presumption that when someone became a judge, they were both wise in the ways of the world and learned and experienced in the practice of law. That is not the case, as I just got through stipulating. It certainly isn't the case when you get to the legislative bodies these days. One of the things that used to be interesting about America's government is that, and that's when I say governments plural, I mean the state governments and the federal government, was that the predominant legislator was formally trained in the law. Now that is a rarity. Too many aren't. They don't know what they're doing. They can't actively participate in the founding, creation, and promulgation of laws because they don't know anything. And they have somebody 22, 23 years old on staff who does not have a law license, a law degree, or any experience in the law, looking through a book trying to draft something. And that's where we have gone right now, because we are more concerned with social agendas than we are with competence in the core purpose of being in a legislative body, which is promulgating, formulating, analyzing, and effectuating the process of legislation that will guide the conduct of America's citizens. So we have completely gotten away from that. And it shows. But it was a good question, sir. I'll pass the mic.
Before I go to John, I want to just usher in the pride topic, because this past Saturday, the White House had hosted a pride party on the South Lawn, and now the president and his administration received a lot of backlash, as they should, when one, but not just one, but several transgender and people and whatever other name they identify with took off their tops and went topless. One of the main ones was a trans influencer, Rose Matayo, flashed her breast and other people, I guess it was a trans man, flashed their bare chest. And now the White House today saying that she is barred from the White House going forward. Well, why would she even be back? Like, a lot of times when they have these events, a lot of those people don't even come back. You shouldn't even allow it. And just the whole thing, having the pride flag draped there. Juneteenth is Monday. I'm curious to see, are they going to have a Juneteenth party or celebration on the South Lawn? Are you going to drop the Juneteenth flag, the correct flag for the Juneteenth? But I just think this was a disgrace. These photos and videos went viral throughout the world, and that just shows a lot. Shows the direction of where this country is headed, especially under this administration. So, yeah, I guess I'll go to John because he had his hand up. But I have a serious problem with that. And I also feel that the pride flag should not be flying under the American flag. Where do I see it? I see it in the city where I'm at right now in Ohio. It just so happened this city is heavily Democratic, and it's a lot of LGBTQ that own homes. So I'm pretty sure they petitioned the local council to have that flag under their flag under American flag. And I just want to say that is something what Black Americans need to do, is push to have the Juneteenth flag flying under the American flag. But this type of behavior is trifling. And then the White House said that this behavior is inappropriate and disrespectful for any event, but it is not reflective of the event we hosted to celebrate LGBTQI plus families and hundreds of guests. So I'll go to John. And anybody else want to request to come up, please do so.
Thank you. And good points that you made there. And it was a total disgrace. And now compare that also to a former president who was chastised, ridiculed, and lambasted for saying something about grabbing a woman by her private parts. You know, I just kind of think that's total hypocrisy there. It's insane. It's crazy. So there's that. And Judge, you brought up something about Article 1, Section 8, and the word Navy and how it was used back then. I read the Federalist Papers, and and that's a hard read too. Oh my God, it was painful. But in the Federalist Papers, they talk about how back then there were politicians that wanted 4 separate territories, basically 4 separate nations within our nation. And I can't remember if it was Hamilton or one of the other founding fathers. Somebody used that as an argument to say that no, we need one nation, one navy to protect our interests as far as the trade and open waters for trade. And I just wanted to throw that into the mix as far as a historical part of our history with the Federalist Papers and the precursor to our Constitution. Thank you.
I'm proud of you for that. Most people would not go that far into their country's history. The Marine Corps hymn celebrates to the shores of Tripoli. What that was about is when the United States got itself away from Great Britain. Great Britain says, well, okay, fine. We're no longer going to protect your shipping from piracy. And everybody from the Etruscans to the Egyptians to the Greeks to the Romans, all throughout recorded history, protected against piracy. And that wound up being one of the principal concerns, because what are we going to do about the fact that the United States is essentially a mercantile nation? So what about the effects of piracy? And the Marines got sent down on board the Constitution, the Old Ironsides, which is still in commission, the Constellation, and some other super frigates that were built to deal with piracy. And we had Decatur and all of that bunch achieved status as heroes for dealing with the Barbary pirates down in the Mediterranean. And that was way back 220 some years ago, or close to 220 years ago. So it's been a long history. And it would have been an inescapable reality that if you had divided the 13 colonies up into 4 parts with limited intercourse, limited resources, some would have been landlocked, some not, that would not have worked out very well. So you're right on that. Now, one of the things, getting back to the topic of the pride bit, you can't put a Christian symbol in the middle of 2 American flags on the left portico of the White House and 2 on the right portico. You can't put an Islamic crescent there either. You can't put the Jewish star there. You can't put the symbol for Buddha there. And you certainly can't put one of the Hindu symbols there, nor anything else. You can't put BLM there because they won't do that, because that becomes advocacy. But for some reason, all of the rules relative to the display of American flag and insignia on official federal buildings, and the White House is certainly one, all of that seems to go out of the window. Now, there is another thing here. You got upset with January 6th, but children are encouraged to watch things to deal with their government. So here are these American children watching this event. And then these clowns come out there and start putting on a burlesque show. You could not take these children into a burlesque club, a strip joint, a topless facility. You can't do that. So all of a sudden it becomes okay to bring that show outside, the strip show outside of the strip club, and show it on national television where children are watching in association with their government. What in the devil is wrong here with this picture? And that's got nothing to do with being pro or con gay rights. More power to them. Get your freak on in your bedroom. That's your right as a citizen. But it is not your authority or anybody's authority to get away with open and notorious public lewdness and show these displays in front of children. It should not be allowed, and every one of them ought to be arrested and convicted if they can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Oh, they could prove it on reasonable doubt because it's video.
Don't judge him, Joe Brown.